Hey y'all, you're listening to the Immersion podcast. Here on the show, we'll learn from guests from all walks of life, exploring the impact of character on the mundane and the extraordinary alike. Thanks for joining. I'm your host, Ben Liu. If you enjoyed today's episode, go share it with a friend. All right, folks, today I am so happy to have my good friend and old mentoree, Bradley Fortuna. How's it going, man?
Oh, so good. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Of course, a pleasure. We're here today in, I almost said Fenway Park, but that's not where we're at.
Yeah. Maybe there's a whole sea of Atlantis down there playing baseball. I don't know.
But where are we again?
Sloan's Lake. Sloan's Lake in Denver.
There we go. Yeah. Man, so Bradley has spent a good amount of time with me on a lot of different photo projects, film projects. He's seen me get crazy enough to do all the little things to the big things where he's like, what the heck are you doing? Like,
there's plenty of those.
Yeah. But we've had the privilege of being around each other. Bradley used to work at a coffee shop back in Rochester called Desert Oasis, and my office was right above it, so we would see each other all the time, and man, it just became a super, super cool thing. I've had the privilege of watching Bradley really grow and take a lot of great risks in his life, which is kind of why we are here today. Actually, it's exactly how we're even here today.
It's definitely how we're here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird.
Bradley, why don't you tell us a little more about yourself from like photo, coffee, different things like that?
Sure. I mean, oh man, that's such a tough thing to just broadly be like, this is me, you know? I take photos, man, and I don't really know what I'm doing in my life at the moment, to be quite honest with you. I work in coffee at the moment at Sweet Bloom Coffee Roasters, but ending that gig soon to go on like a 6-month to indefinite backpacking trip with obviously you know about, which again, don't fully know what I'm doing there, just kind of exploring things. And I just turned 26 and I'm starting to feel like the creep of age. Not like, obviously I'm not old.
Yeah.
I'm great. I feel good.
Good.
But when health insurance goes away and you're off your parents' health insurance, you're which I'm very privileged to be able to get to 26 on that. But that was like a marker where I'm like, oh, this isn't forever. Like I need to start doing things.
Correct.
You know? And like figure that out and figure out what I want out of this life. So.
No longer under the umbrella, so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Time for you to flap your wings. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, I take photos. I've recently gotten way more into street photography, but I don't even like that title. Mm-hmm. I kind of would rather it be like...
just lifestyle or something?
Not even life, because lifestyle gets into like brands and stuff like that and too, fashion, and very like pose stuff. Mm-hmm. Like a photographer of like genuine life or like actual moments that are happening, like candid stuff is really where I'm trying to lean, but that's also a tough avenue to try to make money and do stuff like that. So
absolutely. I don't know. No, it's always something so interesting to try and navigate in that realm, especially just creativity overall.
Right.
So in all of that, it's super cool to see the understanding come through now. Whereas like we've known each other for
3 or 4. So before 2019 maybe is when we knew each other. Yeah. I knew of you from seeing you downtown.
Okay. Yeah,
and walking by you and being, who's that guy with that massive camera? But I never and you had a cool hat on and I was like, who is that guy? And then you ended up being like a regular and part of essentially the coffee shop that I was working at randomly. It was weird connection.
Just a little bit. No, that's so funny. All those younger days.
Yeah.
Man, if I could say anything about having you as a mentor, it was like, man, it was beneficial in both ways where it was like, I had your help on a lot of things, moving stuff like testing for lighting and lenses and all the other things, right? Creative direction for like music videos that we've done back in the day.
Yeah.
But it really pushed me to like a point of like, man, like, do I really know what I'm talking about?
So it challenged you.
Yeah. Right. Because it's one thing to like do the craft and then it's another to explain the craft,
Oh,
which you
totally.
kind of get, right?
Yeah.
From teaching new baristas and just
Sure.
random people about latte art.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, like, well, first we
Totally.
got to get, the spro completely set, and then we're going straight to the milk, which has its own consistency, and then,
Right.
in its own form of expertise, rather. And then you
Sure.
have the actual act of pouring, and that's just for a single design versus a different design and then another
Right.
different design.
Very similar to photography. I mean,
Yeah.
because the lighting's dynamic, everything's
Yeah.
changing, the texture of your milk is changing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was nice for me to be able to watch you teach me as well as watch you interact with other people. In the same way that Tyler, who was my trainer at Desert Oasis,
Shout out to
seeing
T-Bunts.
him interact and seeing him how he taught me and other people, I can almost like find a way to mimic that and then find my own way through that of what is actually in my brain.
Yeah.
I mean, that was huge.
Like what clicked and what really stood out to you so you could actually
Right.
absorb it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We love that. Man, and it was a solid run. It was super exciting to like watch you pursue like the little things from like, hey, like let's try this lighting project, let's try
Sure.
this shooting project,
Yeah.
all the way to like having shot for like Shinola for just a spec gig, but different things like that was just like a really great step, which I think has led you to a bit to where you're at now. And part of
Sure.
the reason why we're here is like some of the choices you've made, all the way to like the understanding of like why being mentored is so important. But I think really let's dial it back, or rewind rather, to like your growth, not because of me, but during the time
Sure.
of the internship.
Oh, so I feel like you're alluding to something that is TikTok. Yeah,
Correct.
weird phase. I guess I'll just give a brief context of that,
Yeah.
and then I'll let you ask whatever more specific question you want on that.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're responsible for this. Actually, I thought about this morning, and I thought about that I might talk about this on here, and I was like, this is kind of Ben's fault, because what happened was, so I briefly like got some micro fame on TikTok. It was a whole thing, and whatever. But how that happened is I showed up to a shift to the coffee shop, and I was 2 hours early for my shift. I didn't look at the schedule right, whatever. I was supposed to work at 10. I was there at 8 o'clock. Scrolling on TikTok, and I see this video that this girl posted, and it was like, post pictures of yourself and someone will fall in love with you. And then it was like, to the tune of music, pictures go. These pictures were like, being a photographer, I'm like, these pictures are terrible because they're just like mirror selfies. Like, she looks great, nothing, no.
The actual photo quality.
But I was
itself,
like, wait a minute. I've been doing my thing with you for 3 months, and you've been taking test shots after test shots of me. And I like, these are high quality photos of myself. And I'm like, I've never had this before. I'm going to post this video of all these really good photos I have just sitting around, because I didn't post them on Instagram. I didn't have anywhere to put them. And so I did that. It took me like the whole 2 hours to make this stupid video that was like 10 seconds.
This was like at the rise of TikTok too, yeah?
Yeah, this was like it was still the phase of everybody being like, oh, TikTok's lame. Like, what? That's like
for kids.
Like,
blah, blah,
yeah, or like e-boys and stuff like that, whatever that thing was.
Yeah.
But so I posted it, and I was time to go to my shift, and I went into my shift, and then I got a text from Juliet, who you know of, obviously, and she was like, oh, look who's on TikTok now, because we had this whole feud of like, I'm never going to download that app's stupid, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? And it had like 20K likes or whatever, and it was like blowing up within the first hour, and I was like, what is happening? And that video got somewhere around like, a little over 250,000 views, and I was like,
casual.
What? Like, what? Well, but that was the first, TikTok nowadays, that's a thing that happens on TikTok. And like, that's yeah, people see that. But I had never even I didn't even think, I thought maybe it would get like 1,000 people see it. Like maybe.
Yeah.
And that's like
best.
not that crazy. And I was like in this shock, and initially I was like, oh, this could be lucrative.
Right.
Cause like it followed to my Instagram, and I was getting followers on Instagram, and I was like doing photography. I was like, this could help my photography. Post a photo or thing of my photography on TikTok, flops. Doesn't work. I'm like, okay. Post another one, doesn't work. And then I post something of myself that was something along the lines of like dating or some like flirty post.
Yeah. It's like, why are you single? And it was like,
yeah, it was something like
Yeah.
that. And that one took off. And I was like, dude, what? This isn't what I want, but it's working. And it's still pushing people to my Instagram, which they're seeing my photography. I'm getting DMs. So then I just, for like 5 or 6 months straight, posted like every day because I'm like, this can work. And from there, pushed TikTok so hard, and it led me down this really weird place, which if you have questions of that, like I rambled enough, but that's the basis of like, you're the reason that happened. Because you had taken pictures of me and I was like, I have good pictures of myself. I'm going to post this.
I was the catalyst. You actually responded upon it.
Right. Well, yeah, once I saw it happen, I was like, well, maybe I should do something. Because it was instantaneous. I got followers on Instagram that were looking at my photography and messaging me about it. So I was like, wait, this could be really big for me. And I wanted to travel at this time. Like I still obviously want to do that. But I was like, this is my ticket. Like, this is my like...
How you'll get to travel the world. And
right.
Like, do
exactly.
creative expression, et cetera, et cetera.
100%. Yeah.
Crazy. What was that like, just knowing like, hey, like figuring that out of like, hey, like if people are really engaging with just my looks, was it such a like conflict of interest at a point where you're like,
It was, yeah. I mean, well, it did a thing. So I didn't have that prior in my life.
Right.
Like that sort of attention. And instantly it was like obviously an ego boost. But the first couple of videos, I'm like, like I'm able to brush it off. I'm still myself. But once I started pushing it heavy, paying attention to the numbers, posting every single day, and like that starting to take the natural wear and tear on your mental health that it does, I think my ego surpassed what I ever thought it could get. And not in the sense of like I'm treating people poorly or like I'm like really thinking that I'm better than someone else, but more so just like thinking that like attaching value to that,
right,
essentially
making that actually part of who you are,
exactly,
at the core of your identity,
right. And that was where it led me to a weird place, and that's when I eventually just like had to stop because I was like, this is just, I feel weird. Like I went on a road trip across the country and posted that all over social media, met with people through TikTok, and everybody I met like knew me or like thought they knew me.
Right. Knew of you at best.
Right. And like, and some people were amazing and great and were like, oh yeah, I know that's just TikTok and you're like a human. Like you're so dynamically different than that.
Right.
But a lot of people, there was some weird interactions and there were some people who like almost expected things of me. And there were even some like influencers that like I would hang out with and like, the whole time it's just like, hey, like, what's up? Hey, yeah, it's TikTok.
What's up?
And I'm like, I didn't post much on my road trip, to be real. Like I posted at least like weekly or like a couple times a week, but based on 1 to 3 times a day, what I was doing before, I was just so over it. And I didn't want to be even associated with it anymore.
You didn't want to be bread boy.
Yeah, but I wasn't even bread. That wasn't even, it was just Bradley Fortuna.
That's
bread
right.
boy is who I want to be. That's my Instagram now. And that's just, hey, I take pictures and I'm living my life. And that is what it is. My friends call me bread.
This is true.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, man. It was a weird phase for me.
You do know. Don't say you don't know.
Well, I guess I'm not remembering the question.
Oh.
Of like what I'm trying to answer.
There wasn't much of a question.
I just rambled again.
I
don't know.
It was because I set you on this path.
Right. No, I'm aware, again, that it's your fault. But I just don't quite remember where I was going with that. It was just it was a weird time. I definitely there were also things I would say. Initially, I started, like I would talk about my personal life sometimes on there.
Yeah.
Because nobody knew that I was on, like nobody that I knew really knew
who you were or was in like the proximity to like
actually, like it wasn't going to come back around in my head, but then there were like certain times, or maybe like 3 times or so, that I posted something and it was about something in my personal life and it came back around to somebody who like knew who I was talking about.
Oh, that's right. I think I remember this experience.
Well, there were 3 or 4 of these experiences and I was like, dude, this is not what I want.
Right.
Like, because I also wasn't going to therapy at that time. So I like had no one to, like, I had my friends to talk to, I had you to talk to, but there were certain things where I was like, I just want to put this out and like just let it be and not affect anything.
Yeah.
But then because I had a following, it was like, you can't be saying this stuff. And I was like, oh, I didn't like, this wasn't my intention.
Yeah,
like
you're like, I'm not PR trained. Like,
right.
what?
Not even the slightest. And that's the other, there's just too much pressure around it. Like, and I was, when I say microfame, I had microfame. Like,
legitimately.
Which, to conceptualize what like real fame is like someone with millions of followers or someone who's been in big movies, like the pressure that comes with like how people perceive you is so wild. Because that's something everyone battles with at some point. And I just can't even conceptualize what that's like on a real level of fame.
Yeah.
Rather than like a few 100,000 followers on TikTok. It's weird. Scary.
Yeah, because it's like you're probably also experiencing like people just randomly coming up to you and going like, "Hey, are you Bradley Fortuna?" Like, I think
it would happen more than I ever thought it would, especially from that level of like little microfame. But also because people knew where I worked.
Yeah,
because that was a whole thing.
Yeah, well, also because you're posting it on Insta and after
I've learned now a little bit about that. I still do have put out there like I did on here where I work, but
yeah,
I'll be gone in a week. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's I don't know, man. It's a weird world. We're living in a really weird world.
It is.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, the things or the the attractions that people want to put themselves in, or like the time they want to throw into things.
Sure.
Even though they might not even have anything close to like a real commitment to it. They just are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, and even like for me, I put everything. Like I dropped a lot of our mentorship and a lot of our photo stuff, not entirely, but I mean, I cut it short by like a month or two, something of that nature.
2 or 3, yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. Because I was like, I need to focus on this. But I was just throwing all, it was just kind of like a crapshoot. I was like, this is working. I need to pursue this.
Yeah, you're like abandoned ship.
But,
this is like the trend and I got to run with it. Yeah,
and it was all, but it wasn't true to me. And that's why I think I haven't gone back to it fully, is because it was like.
All consuming.
It was all consuming. And it was like, even when you asked me why I take photos when you were here last, I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm in a phase of trying to figure that stuff out and figure out my why and like, what do I want to do and who do I want to be? And trying to pursue some like personal brand or someone like latching onto me as a person through like who I am and me not knowing who I am or why I do what I do. It was just like, that was so not true to me to pursue that. I don't know. It just felt like I was just doing it just because of the numbers and because I was like, well, this could make me money and I could, push my photography, like, and I could travel the world. Like I could fulfill my dreams, but like, is that even how I would want to, like, would I feel good? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
Would you feel fulfilled even?
I don't think so. Because even on my road trip, I was like pretty depressed for some of it, where I was like, I would wake up in the back of my car, which was like my dream at that time. I was like, that's sick. And the mountains are right there, the Grand Tetons. And I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to just lay in bed.
Pity boy party.
Yeah. And I was like, what am I doing, man? So, yeah. I don't know, man.
Yeah. I remember that time. It was like so interesting because it was, I think when you had told me you were going to cut the internship short, there was about 2-3 months or 1 month, whatever it was. And I remember going like, okay, like, let's kind of like pause.
Sure.
Let's figure out what's going on. And I think this had a lot to do with figuring out like, hey, like, not on shame, not on what you could have done or whichever. It was like, hey, like, what's really going on?
Right.
Because you knew, and you and I knew ahead of time that you were going on this trip that was like a few summers ago, like that this was the thing. Like, because I think we started with like a 3-month internship and then we were like, okay, we're going to do a 6-month thing. And then we kind of roll from there. We had a lot of cool different projects in between that, like going down to Tulum with Bree and Alex and meeting everyone there and so on. But it was like the balance of like, frick, like work, internship, TikTok, and then the trip, and then the trip got pushed back so far less that it was like, by the time it reached you.
Yeah, by the time I was ready to go, I wasn't ready to go.
Right.
Yeah,
between
that
like
makes
figuring out
sense.
like how am I gonna prepare the vehicle, like what set locations, and like who am I actually gonna want to meet and have to meet
Mm-hmm.
are two different lists and different things like that. That in trying to talk through it, it was like, okay, like I had to understand in letting you go. It's like, hey, like I get it. Like there's something that's pressing. You see some opportunity, and it's like just got to run after it. And so like at that point, it was like, okay, like kind of sucks, but I get it.
Right.
And then I think the cool part was that when you came back, like we still saw each other at DO, nothing like bad.
No.
I think the redeeming part that I think, and you could tell me otherwise, obviously, that's just from my perspective,
Sure.
for how you got to Denver was this catalyst of like you humbly coming and saying like, hey, like, can we talk? Because I think you're the only person that can understand even probably like closer to an ounce of like what went on during your trip.
Right.
From like disappointments to letdowns and different things like that, or like even like false promises, people not showing up to shoots.
Sure. Yeah.
At like some pretty remote locations that are like super awesome, but also like
Now I'm here. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
took
yeah,
self-portraits.
yeah,
Which felt like the most vain thing because I just went from doing all this TikTok stuff and all about me, not my photography. And then I'm like, I'm going to take pictures of myself.
yeah.
Like I didn't,
resorted back to that
Right. Well, because that was a
whole ordeal.
Right.
And it's not to say like, oh, you were humble and you said sorry. No, it wasn't that. It was actually the fact that like you could say, hey, like I need some help.
Sure.
Right. Because I think we had that conversation, and I think shortly after or in that same conversation, I was like, hey, you should really talk to my mentor, Chris.
That's how that came up. I like forgot how that even came about.
Yeah.
Like, because I remember you brought it up and it was like kind of a thing. And then it was like it was just like a thought. And I was like, yeah. And then you brought it up again. And I was like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that like, so for a little bit of context, Chris Nightingale, love you. You may or may not watch this.
Likewise. Love you so much.
Chris has been a mentor to me from like the exact month I picked up my first camera, literally. Like he hired me onto a big wedding in Grand Rapids, like my first month of picking up
the camera.
Yeah, bro.
Wow.
Like not full time, nothing, like just first time ever. He was like, hey, you're pretty good. Like you've got the eye. And I'm like, okay.
Dang.
And just really gave me a running start and has consistently given me a lot of great life tips from like, hey, like one, to double dip appropriately on like different things, whether it be time or like, if you're at a place and you're working and then you have extra time, why don't you actually like source extra work because
Sure.
you're there. So he's been a great resource and friend, and had the pleasure of documenting his wedding, which was crazy. I'm like,
Sure.
what? But yeah, like what was that process like? Because at least like going from like me to Chris, like obviously him and I are two different people, but the focuses were so different because it was no longer just photos. Because I would
Right.
talk about like, hey, like what about who you are? And
Sure.
it was like always like
Yeah.
and not in bad things. It was just
Right.
like, yeah, not the main focus at the time.
No, I'd say, I mean, in general, having a mentor is obviously huge. And I think most people know why that is.
Mm-hmm.
For me, a big thing is like with you, the amount of times I would go to you for criticism, like I wanted criticism. And that having that space to be able to be like, I want this person's criticism is huge. And for photos, that was obviously huge. But there was a different focus with you. It started as photos, and that was like mainly a thing. Obviously, we would have deeper conversations, but it felt like more like just on like a person-to-person, like friend-to-friend basis.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Chris, that was like the focus. And with Chris, it was just a really interesting thing because I'd never had that. And like almost immediately within like the first like 20 minutes of talking, he was like, oh, you have ADHD, don't you? And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, but like so does like everyone. He's like, yeah, but exactly what you just explained. He's like, I've gone through the same thing. And he basically was able to like lay out why I do what I do within like the first hour of us talking. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Did
like,
that make you feel like seen and known and heard?
Right. And the other thing within that though is there's no, with Chris, there was, not that I'm saying you put pressure on me. You did in times that was needed and like are things where it should have happened. But also it started as an internship of like photography.
Right.
So there was like this work pressure with Chris, it was like, hey, the only thing that I need from you out of this is that you promise that one day you will help someone else out in the future. You know, when you have knowledge and when you've accrued a life that you feel good about and you want to share that and you want to help someone else get where they want to get, that you offer this. And like, you know, hopefully this will blossom into a friendship, but like there's no pressure on that. It's just like, hey, I'm here for you. Let's chat. What do you want out of life, essentially? And like, what's your deal? Like, what's your story? Like, and how do you feel? It's almost like a form of therapy in reality.
Yeah.
But I think that relieved there's no pressure there. It's like it can be anything I want. Like, oh, I want to start a business, or, oh, I want to do this. And then there's just some level of accountability, but not like, he's not going to like,
Beat you across the head.
Yeah. And not that you would either, but there's, I don't know. That was a nice thing. I guess I don't know. Totally rambled again.
No, you're good.
I forgot. You wanted me to compare the two.
Well, not even compare the two. It was like, hey, like, what was that process of just like walking life and going through that mentorship with Chris? Like, and how did it benefit you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it gave me so much clarity, and I'm bummed that I haven't like been able to like continue that while being out here in Colorado as much. Because we would meet like I think roughly once a month, and just like I'd be able to tell him everything and have a fully unbiased opinion. Again, it was basically therapy.
Yeah.
But therapy from like someone who I already know and I already trust, and who is living a life of integrity that I feel like I would be very prideful to live his life. Whereas with therapy, it's a little bit different because you don't know that person. Go to therapy, kids. It's a good thing. But,
Agreed.
Man, as far as what did it look like, I guess what do you, like, what did the conversations look like, or how
did it shape up your life, you know? Because I think
Sure.
like to acknowledge being mentored is a good thing is like what you said, like everybody knows it, but like what is the actual fruit of it, you know?
Sure.
Or if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
And maybe it's just because I'm like on the outside looking in and had like, it'd almost be like you'd meet with Chris and then I'd recap with you and then I'd be able to still catch up.
Right.
And so like I get to help streamline because you have work in a few hours or not in a few hours, in an hour or so.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I thought it was super cool. And again, biased because I know Chris and love Chris and different things like that. But I knew it would be good for you because Chris was the kind of guy who could give you a strategy, give you a layout, give you both pros and cons and like why you should, why you shouldn't. Also like, hey, like what's there to lose if you don't?
Right.
All at the same time, still being able to relate to you and still give you like a fair share of life skills to approach life itself.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, as a whole, this is a terrible metaphor that I'm about to use, and it might make sense, but you know the thing of like an angel and a demon being on the shoulder?
Yeah.
I feel like having like a mentor there is like adding another angel, another voice on your shoulder that you know is good and that you know has sense to it.
You're like stacking the deck in the way.
Right. So that's like part of the whole of it. But yeah, with Chris specifically, the ability to like, okay, so this is what you have planned. This is what you should plan out and figure out. And these are like your tactile next steps. It just like gave me a roadmap and gave me like, it was like there was nothing in front of me and I had no idea. And then a staircase appeared and it's like, oh, those are the first 3 steps. Cool. I'm going to go from there. And only because he was there to be like, no, like slow down. You're overthinking this part. Let's just talk about this and figure out what you want here. Mm-hmm. And then once you figure that out, then we can take the next steps.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Which ended up being moving to Colorado.
Somehow, some way. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of like, I needed to go out on my own and go to a city where I didn't know anybody and where like I could almost redefine myself in a way. I needed that for my self-confidence, and also inevitably that makes you grow. And I had to move out and do that whole thing. So that was just a forceful way of doing that. And finding a job out here that I liked and enjoyed and felt good about was like that pillar. So once I got that, it was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So then why Colorado? Was it just something that was like part of your trip or just a lifelong thing?
So people might hate me for this. When I went on my road trip and I came through Denver and I went to a bunch of other places too, Denver was one of the places I was like, nah, this isn't it.
Really?
I was like, I don't like this.
Wow.
I was like, this is like, but what you have to know is I went to 16th Street Mall, which is like just like the main strip. And then like,
is that where we went for lunch one day?
no, I don't think so. I wouldn't have taken you.
Oh,
I wouldn't have taken
cool.
you. That's like the tourist spot in Colorado.
Okay.
That's like the number one on like things to do, but everybody here is like, why would you go there?
Mm.
It's just like a shopping center outside.
Oh.
But yeah, I came here and I just was like, this isn't it. Like it just did not feel it at all. Other parts of Colorado, 100%, I was like, maybe here, but Denver was not it. And then I moved here and I was like, I kind of like it. The city is, it's all right. Yeah.
It's the city.
There's just not, it's a transit city, so there's not much like pride. Like in Detroit, there's there's more culture there that sticks, whereas here it feels like there's not as much like
concrete foundation.
Yeah, and that's speaking on being here for a year.
Yeah.
I know there's things that are concrete in Denver, and I'm just one of those people that came in here and is ruining everything. So I'm aware of that, but yeah, it's weird how I landed on this because I was totally like, I won't move to Denver. It's not really a city I want to be in.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But
yeah,
it's interesting because now you are just a few weeks away from going on your trip to Europe.
Yeah, and not just, I mean, it's basically an indefinite backpacking trip through Europe, Morocco, and then Asia. And now I have a friend who's going to be moving back to Australia, so I'll probably from Asia pop over there.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird place to be because everything's in a storage unit right now.
Yeah.
And I'm living out of a backpack. So this is always something I've wanted to do. And that turning 26 was like, I haven't done this yet. I need to do this. I need to do this. Yeah. So yeah, and through this is hopefully some level of the cliche self-discovery journey, you know, of finding certain things out about myself and what I want out of life and where I want to be, who I want to be with, and like who I want to show up as in relationships and such. So yeah, I'm coming up on that.
Yeah.
Pretty shortly here.
It'll be a fun journey.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, because the last time we talked just earlier last month was that like, hey, like you can keep doing these trips, but until you figure out like how to actually meld who you are to your photography. Right. And not just because you can do it, but versus like, hey, like who do you actually embody and breathe? Breathe, breath. Yeah. Is going to be so key and vital. So I'm excited for you on that part of your journey because, I mean, obviously the photos and the videos would be great.
Sure.
All his handles will be, well, in the captions and everything like that. But, man, I don't want to hold up too much time because we still have to drive over to Sweet Bloom where you have your last week.
Yeah, last week.
Man.
Yep.
For any aspiring photographers, videographers, and even just like people who are dabbling into social media fame or just social media, like what advice would you have?
Oh gosh, that's tough. Because an instinct wants to say, don't let it get to your head. Like when it starts working.
Yeah.
Like try to find the happy medium of like, you're going to have your highs and you're going to have your lows, and try to find a way to be in that, like, not melancholy in like a bad way, but just like staying kind of grounded. Like you have to, before you pursue that stuff, if you want it to last, I feel like you have to have some level of groundedness of like, why are you doing it? What is it that you want out of this? And like being sure of yourself in that.
Yeah.
And not saying that can't develop as you pursue it.
Right.
But I mean, it's a tough thing when you have one video pop off and then the next one drops.
Right. I guess here's a great question because I think it's really pointed. If you could think back to the height of your TikTok career, if you will.
Yeah.
So what was that, 3 years ago? Let's just say 2.5.
Yeah, something. I don't know.
So whatever age that was. So
Sure,
23.
Sure. Yeah.
In that situation, if you could speak to your younger self, what advice would you give? Knowing now what you know now.
Oh, man. In the height of it?
Yeah. Or just like what you think 23-year-old Bradley would have needed to hear.
Think for yourself, because a lot of what I did was for the validation of other people, and a big part of it was female validation for me, because I was like, I wanted to be sought after, and I had never felt that before. So the second I got it, I was like, and I think that goes not just for the opposite sex or anything romantic, but just like the validation in itself is nice, but it can be too much. And if you seek it, and you have to question everything you're doing, I guess, is really my advice, and why you're doing it. Is it just for the validation of other people, or is it something that you truly in your heart want to do? And I guess that's where I would like stop myself in my tracks and be like, slow down. What do you want? Like, I'd start to actually focus on myself and question myself. And I think I put way too much value on other people's validation in that way. And I still, to an extent, do it to this day.
You're working through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that would be my biggest thing. Because also with social media being that space.
Yeah.
It's like you're constantly looking for the likes and the validation and the views. So
hands down.
So yeah, I'd question why you're doing what you're doing.
And then any last words about mentoring?
Oh, just as a broad? Like,
yeah. Any encouragement for younger viewers?
Find someone who's living the life you want to live, or even if it's just like a part of their life, like whether it's their career or they've had success with wealth creation or in romance or just in personal social life, and like get close to them and offer them some sort of value, or, some way try to give yourself to them in order to learn something from them.
Absolutely.
And if they only have like the social life you want and they don't have the career you want, obviously take the social advice, maybe leave the career advice at the door, or take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
It's kind of the biggest thing, because everybody always wants to give advice.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
More like opinions.
Right. Same difference. Yeah.
Here
Yeah.
and there, depending.
Right.
Depending on where it falls.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, y'all, we're going to wrap it up here so that Bradley and I can be timely in our schedule.
Sure.
Do you want people following you on just a bread boy, or?
Yeah, just look up a bread boy, all one word, on Instagram. There'll be a picture of Curious George. That's me. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'll pursue the TikTok stuff.
Good.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll revisit whenever you get back.
There you go. Exactly.
Well, folks, that's all for today. If you like this episode, just do me a favor and share it. Hit subscribe or follow, depending on whatever platform this falls on. But yeah, we'll catch y'all soon.
Take care.